Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the lecture today, which is in connection with the celebration of. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the lecture today with regard to the celebration of 100th birth anniversary of late Dattopant Tengdeji. I would like to enlighten the members who are not aware of Dattopant Tengdeji. He was born in 1919 and he had contributed majorly to the Sangh organizations. He was the president, he was the founder of Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, and with his initiative in the year 1992, along with few nationalist advocates, he started the Adhivakta Parishad, which is an organization of nationalist advocates, and it started in a very humble way with few advocates, and today Adhivakta Parishad is the largest advocates association not only in the country but in the world. It has its presence from Kanyakumari to Kashmir and from Gujarat to Mizoram. The Nyayavadi Parishad Telangana, which was started after the bifurcation of the state of Andhra Pradesh, and as per the guidelines of the All India Adhivakta Parishad, we have also started lectures on various topics. You might have already heard the lecture of Sri Gupta ji on Section 6 of Hindu Succession Act last week. So this is the second lecture, and we want to continue this process, more particularly to keep the advocates engaged, and the very object of Nyayavadi Parishad is to hone the skills and make the advocates enhance their skills to become a good advocate and also judges in future. Now, with this intention, we have started this program, and as all of you are under a lockdown, and we would like to make the advocates spend their time by learning and also contributing to the society by virtue of the technical help what we have today. So friends, now I would like to go into the topic of today's lecture, which is amendment of pleadings, a case study. Now, being advocates, you are all aware that pleadings are the foundation of litigation and plays a very important role in the success or otherwise of a litigation. Hence, the advocates have to be very cautious and take care in preparing the pleadings. Now, today's topic is amendment of pleadings. Before I delve on the said topic, because we have to take pleadings as a whole. Now, what is pleadings is under Order 6, Rule 1 states that it is the plaint and written statement. Now, plaint is the facts, bundle of facts which the plaintiff files, narrates in a case and files in a court. And written statement under Order 8 is filed by the defendant in answer to the plaint allegations made by the plaintiff. The definition of pleadings can be taken from Moga's Laws of Pleadings. Pleadings are statements in writing drawn up and filed by each party to a case, stating what his contentions will be at the trial and giving all such details as his opponents needs to know in order to prepare his case in answer. And the defendant's pleading is his written statement wherein a defense in which the defendant deals in every material fact alleged by the plaintiff in the plaint and also states any new facts which are in his favor, adding such legal objection as he wishes to take to the claim. To sum up, the Honorable Supreme Court in Ganesh Trading Company versus Moji Ram, reported in AAR 1978 SC, page 484, had observed the provisions relating to pleadings in civil cases are meant to give to each side intimation of the case to the other, so that it may be met to enable courts to determine what is really at issue between the parties and to prevent deviation from the course which the litigation on particular cause of action must take. And also, in the case of Virendra Kashinath versus Vinayak N. Joshi, reported in AR 1999 SC, page 162, the object of the rule is twofold. First is to afford the other side intimation regarding the particular facts of his case so that they may be met by the other side. Second is to enable the court to determine what really is the issue between the parties. So, the entire case is based on the pleadings of the plaintiff and defendant. To sum up, pleadings do not only define the issues between the parties for the final decision of the court at the trial, they manifest and exert their importance throughout the whole process of litigations. Hence, it can be safely said that the pleadings are the foundation of the litigation. Now, as most of the advocates would like to know, what are the rules of pleading? The pleadings are based on the following general principles. First, the pleading should state facts and not law. Second, the facts stated should be material facts. Pleading should not state the evidence. The facts should be stated in a concise form. Now, to elaborate those principles, with regard to the first point I stated, where the pleading should be facts, the facts leading to the cause of action has to be stated, and if any custom or usage is to be pleaded, it has to be done specifically. And where any mixed question of law or fact is there, it has to be specifically pleaded. So, what we have to plead is the facts and not the law. The second point is what facts are to be pleaded. Now, only material facts has to be pleaded. Material facts have not been defined under the code, and it means all facts upon which the plaintiff's cause of action or the defendant's defense depends, or in other words, all those facts which must be proved in order to establish the plaintiff's right to the relief claim, or the defendant's defense in the written statement. Now, this has been stated by the Supreme Court in Uddhav Singh versus Madhav Rao Scindia, AAR 1976 SC page 734, which defined the expression material facts. It has stated that all primary facts which must be proved by the parties to establish the existence of a cause of action or his defense are material facts. Now, the facts which leads to the list or the cause of action are the material facts, and for the defendant, the facts which he relies upon for his defense are material facts. So this has to be taken into account by the advocates while framing the suit or the written statement. Now, the third principle is with regard to pleading should be only facts and not the evidence by which those facts are to be proved. Now, in this regard, what has to be pleaded is facta probanda. Facts or probanda are facts required to be proved is known as facta probanda, and facts which are by means of which they are to be proved, that is evidence or particulars, are facta probentia. Now this can be clarified with an illustration of an English case, Brodale versus Hunter. In this, the case facts were A was insured with an insurance company, and one of the terms of the policy was that the policy would be void if the insured committed suicide. A actually committed suicide by shooting himself with a pistol, and thereupon an action was brought against the company on the policy. The company should only plead that A committed suicide. This is a facta probanda, and not how A committed suicide, which is facta probentia. Now this basically is an important aspect because we see in many of the plaints the entire evidence also are narrated by the advocates while framing the suit or the defense. So what is required to be done is only the facts have to be proved, not the evidence. Then the last principle is that the pleading should be in a concise form. The pleading should be drafted with sufficient brevity and precision, and the material facts should be stated precisely, succinctly and coherently, and hence the pleading should be precise, specific and unambiguous, and every pleading should be divided into paragraphs and subparagraphs, and the dates, numbers must be mentioned in figures as well as words. Now this principle is concerned, basically what I would like to advise the advocates is that the pleadings or narration of facts need not be very lengthy. It should be concise. Now, to make it concise, it has to be, every fact has to be pleaded in paragraphs or subparas, and the dates and numbers etc. and figures are to be put in words and figures. And apart from this, the other important aspects to be considered is where special cases are concerned, namely cases concerning misrepresentation, fraud, breach of trust, willful default, or undue influence has to be specifically pleaded. You all are aware that a person who alleges fraud has to, the burden is on him to prove the factum of fraud, for which there should be proper pleading in the plaint or written statement. Similarly, in specific relief act, before the amendment, they under section 16, one of the conditions was that you should not, that is the fact about always willing and ready to perform is part of the obligation. Now this, as per section 16, has not only to be pleaded but also to be proved. So in a suit for specific performance, it is important to plead that the plaintiff has always been ready and willing to perform as part of the obligation. Now, these are the specific areas of laws which require a specific pleading. Now, such pleadings has to be there in the plaint, and vice versa in the written statement also. If any defense has to be taken on count, that has to be done in the written statement. Hence, the advocates have to take extra care and caution while framing the suit or the defense, and every pleading has to be signed and verified by the party concerned, because if there is no pleading, you cannot have any evidence. That is the settled law, as stated by the Supreme Court in Vinod Kumar versus Sujit Kaur, reported in AR 1987, SC page 2179. No amount of proof can substitute pleadings, which are the foundation of the claim of a litigation. So, these aspects have to be considered by the advocates while framing the suit or the writing the written statement. Now, you all know that the pleadings, which are the foundation of a list or litigation, is very important, and advocates has to take utmost care and caution while framing the suit or writing the defense. Many a times we see, due to the constraint of time or otherwise, we tend to ignore important aspects, and ultimately when the client loses the case, it would be due to the mistake of the advocate in not pleading the not taking care of drafting the pleading as required under law. So I request all advocates to give more attention to the pleadings and take proper care while drafting a case or a written statement. Now, coming to the part of amendment of pleadings, you all are aware that prior to the Amending Act of 2002, Order 6, Rule 17 permitted either of the parties to amend their pleadings at any stage. The wording used is at any stage of the case where any party wants to amend the plaint for whatever reason or whatever facts, new facts to be stated, can file an application for amending the plaint. And you are also aware that because of the enormous pendency in the courts, the Government of India through the Law Commission had made a study with regard to expediting the disposal of the cases. Now, in this process, in 1999, there were some radical amendments to the CPC, and one such amendment was exclusion of Rule 17 and 18 of Order 6. Now, friends, you would know that this was done mainly because Order 6, Rule 17 were was being misused by the litigants to prolong the litigation. And the study found that 80% of the cases are protracted by way of Order 6 Rule 17 because it is the easiest of the provision to misuse. Now, taking into account such drastic step was taken that they prohibited any amendment to the plaint once after filing of the plaint. Now, after that, due to the protest by our advocates community, as without there being a provision to amend, it will be difficult for the courts to do real justice, because it is quite possible that as a human you commit mistake, and the amendment provision is only to rectify those and also to introduce new facts which should be relevant to decide the dispute. And this was ultimately considered by the government, and the 2002 Act, it was reintroduced, Order 6 Rule 17 and 18, but Order 17 was reintroduced with a proviso. Now the proviso states that in case of the amendment application being filed, it is rather in the negative sense, no amendment shall be permitted after the commencement of trial unless the party shows due diligence. So it put one more rider, making the amendment or discretion of the putting a rider to the discretion of the court and curtailing their power in granting an amendment easily. And the main reason was that because of the delay being caused by the filing of amendment application, because most of the applications were filed at the time of arguments or after the evidence had commenced, so which was delaying the process further. So I would like to state that the background under which this amendment was made, curtailing the power of the pre-existing provision of amendment. Now, first of all, the amendment is concerned on what basis you can file an amendment. Order 6 Rule 17 provides for amendment of pleading for the purpose of rectifying the mistakes, if any, stating new facts based on fresh information, or any technical flaw in the pleadings. The object of the rule is that the court should try the merits of the case that comes before them and should consequently allow all amendments that may be necessary for determining the real question in controversy between the parties, provided that it does not cause injustice or prejudice to the other side. Hence, two aspects, cardinal principle, are to be looked into here. One is, the object is to determine the real question in controversy. This is the first cardinal principle in allowing an amendment petition. Secondly, that the same doesn't cause injustice or prejudice to the other side. These two principles are to be borne in mind by the court while allowing or refusing an amendment. The court, while deciding an application, should not refuse bona fide, legitimate, honest and necessary amendments. And conversely, it should not allow malafide, dishonest or unnecessary amendments. This principle was laid down by the Supreme Court in Ramesh Kumar Agarwal versus Raj Malla Exports Private Limited, reported in AR 2012 SC 1887. And prior to the amendment of the said provision, now, as I stated earlier, an amendment as per the reading of Rule 17, it permitted an application to be filed at any stage of the proceedings, and the court would consider the same and refuse the amendment if it is not necessary for determining the real question in controversy or causes injustice or prejudice to the other side. It has been observed by the courts that the courts had exercised the power liberally, and it would not be out of place to mention that any amendment substituting a new cause of action or to change the very nature of the suit is not permissible, as the same would be beyond the question of determining the real question of controversy. That apart, even when limitation point is involved, because you all know, suppose I file a suit for recovery of money, the limitation is 3 years. Now there might be an occasion that I might have claimed say 1 lakh, and after 3 years when the litigation is pending, I come up with an application stating that there is another 50,000 which I have to realize from the defendant, and therefore I may be permitted to amend the plaintiff. Now in this situation, basically where the claim itself is palpably barred by limitation, the courts would refuse to allow the amendment application. And there are instances, because there are instances where the court has left this question open to be tried along with the merits of the case. Because as you all know, that while deciding an application seeking leave to amend the plaintiff, the merits of the amendment did not be gone into. Now this question, the courts have given divergent views, and logically what I feel is that once a claim is barred, the same has to be rejected even by way of an amendment. Now, the question that arises is what is the discretion of the court in allowing amendment? I would say that Order 6 Rule 17, even after the amendment, as far as pre-trial amendments are concerned, it gives wide discretion to the court to allow the application, because there are two aspects to it. As I said earlier, the amendment should be for proper determination of the list between the parties, and it should not cause injustice or prejudice to the rights of the other side. So all such amendments application can be allowed, because allowing of an amendment petition would not be adjudicating on the rights of the parties vis-a-vis the trial of the suit is concerned. So any amendments pre-trial can be allowed, and because the defendant also, suppose it is an amendment of plaintiff, the defendant also has a right to file an additional written statement, wherein he can meet that situation of the amended part of the plaintiff. Similarly is the case of written statement. Hence, this aspect was considered by the Law Commission, and as I said earlier, initially it took a very radical view of the provision and removed the provision from the CPC. And thereafter, after agitation of the advocates, the amending act was permitted. Now, you all would be aware that the two conditions what I said earlier is for pre-trial amendments is to satisfy two conditions, namely not working injustice to the other side and being necessary for the purpose of determining the real question in controversy between the parties. Hence, the amendment of pleadings are allowed to avoid multiplicity of suits or where the parties in the plaint are wrongly described or where some properties are omitted from the plaint by inadvertence or there is a mistake in the statement of cause of action or a bona fide omission in making the necessary averments in the plaint or a suit is brought under a wrong act. Now, and also to incorporate the subsequent events. Now, these circumstances, the court considers it favorably and allows such amendments. Now, the court can refuse to amend a plaint under the following circumstances. It can be refused if the amendment is not required for determining the real question in controversy between the parties, or it causes prejudice or injustice to the other side. That apart, where merely technical or useless or without any substance. So under these circumstances, the courts can refuse, and also if it introduces a totally new case or changes the fundamental character of the suit or defense, and further where the fresh claim by way of amendment is barred by limitation, the court can reject such an amendment. And an example of the English case, what I would just like to give an example of an English case of Weldon versus Neil. In this case, A filed a suit against B for damages for slander. A thereafter applied for leave to amend the plaint by adding fresh claims in respect of assault and false imprisonment. And at the date of the application, those claims were barred by limitation, though they were within the period of limitation when the suit was filed. The amendment was refused since the effect of granting it would be to take away from B the legal right of limitation and would cause prejudice to him. So here, as I said earlier, when the question of limitation stares at you and palpably it is barred by time, the courts can dismiss the application. Now that is what the English case has done. But as far as our courts are concerned, as I said earlier, there are divergent views whether to consider this aspect at the stage of seeking leave itself or it should be done. So that basically is still a grey area. Some judgments are there which says that it can be done at a later stage by going through the trial, and some of the judgment says that it can be, application itself can be dismissed, because one aspect has to be the reckoning of the date of amendment. Now what happens if I file a suit today and after 3 years I file an amendment application, and if the amendment application is allowed, it reckons back to the date of suit. Now that basically would be the question which arises with regard to limitation and all. Now the reckoning also, the courts in India, the judgments are that even though normally all the amendments reckon back to the date of suit, but it is again in the discretion of the court, if in specific cases, to say that the amendment will be only from the date of application made for amendment. So this aspect also has to be considered while defending or prosecuting an application for amendment. Now what the Amending Act of 2002 has done is, because the provision of Order 6, Rule 17 starts with the word may, which means it is purely discretion of the court. Now, discretion of the court should be applied judicially. Now, Amending Act of 2002 curtailed the power of court to allow amendments of pleading after the trial has commenced, and put the same to the test of due diligence to be applied in considering whether the amendment has to be allowed or not. Now, this is the crucial question, because many a times what we see is that the advocates realize at the end of the trial that they require the plaint or written statement to be amended. Now, at this particular situation is concerned, the advocates have to be very cautious while dealing with the case. Now, that is why I said before going into the amendment, I had started with the pleadings itself. Now, the pleading should be so framed that you won't occasion a chance for going for amendment. Now, here, after this amending, what is due diligence? Now, due diligence is basically the fact that as after the commencement of trial, if any application is filed, you have to establish that what prevented you from filing the application prior to the commencement of trial. Now, before coming to that, because the wording used in the proviso is commencement of trial. Now, what is the commencement of trial is again a grey area where courts have interpreted it differently. In fact, there are some judgments which says that once the issues are framed and the suit is posted for trial, it would amount to commencement of trial. And there are judgments to the extent that where the evidence affidavit is not filed or no documents are filed, and only on presentation of the affidavit of evidence and documents are marked, the trial is deemed to be commenced. Now, whatever it may, the question what has to be considered is that once an evidence affidavit is filed, it would tantamount to say that the trial has commenced. Once that stage is crossed, then basically the question of establishing due diligence arises. Now, I'll come to the judgments later. So, the basic question required to be satisfy the court is to give reason as to why the application could not be filed earlier, that is, before commencement of the trial. The courts have been very strict in considering application filed after the commencement of trial, and therefore the advocates have to be cautious while preparing the application for amendment, because they have to give cogent reasons for non-filing of the petition when the cause for amending the plaint or written statement was available before the commencement of trial. If the requirement for amendment arises due to a fact which happens subsequent to the date of trial, then basically you will only have to plead that it arose because the opportunity you came to know only on so and so date about these facts which are relevant for deciding the case. So that would be sufficient for you to aver in your petition for leave to amend the plaint. Hence, the Amending Act does not bar amendment completely, and it only curtails and restricts the powers of the court in allowing an amendment petition filed belatedly, that is, after commencement of the trial. So, the advocates have to be diligent in prosecuting their cases, and they have to be cautious and take care while preparing an application for amendment at a belated stage so as to see that the requirement of the law is complied with. So that has to be borne in mind. I would also like to state that while considering the application for an amendment, the courts need not go into the merits of the amendment, as the same would be considered at the time of trial. And further, any application for amendment once it is allowed as per Rule 18, has to be complied within 14 days or such time the court fixes. Otherwise, the amendment will become redundant. Now, this particular amending act, some judgments I could lay my hands on because this was first tested. The validity, as you all know, that Salem Bar Association case. Now, page 7. Salem Bar Association case arises out of a writ petition challenging the amendments made to CPC by the Amending Act of 2002. Now, the Honorable Supreme Court has considered all the amended provision and including Order 6, Rule 17. Now, with regard to Order 6, Rule 17 is concerned, it has held as follows, which is the Salem Bar Association case reported in 2005 Supreme Court. Order 6, Rule 17 of this code deals with amendment of pleadings. By Amendment Act 46 of 99, this provision was deleted. It has again been restored by the Amendment Act 22 of 2002, but with an added proviso to prevent application for amendment being allowed after trial has commenced, unless court comes to the conclusion that in spite of due diligence, the party could not have raised the matter before the commencement of trial. The proviso, to some extent, curtails absolute discretion to allow amendment at any stage. Now the application is filed after commencement of trial, it has to be shown that in spite of due diligence, such amendment could not have been sought earlier. The object is to prevent frivolous applications which are filed to delay the trial, and therefore there is no illegality in the provision. So, the Honorable Supreme Court had found that the amendment is in order and that it is not violating the constitutional provisions, because the very object of amending Order 6, Rule 17 by introducing a proviso is to see that frivolous applications are not filed, and that apart, the delay should not be cause to the litigation. Now, I would also like to cite another judgment which would be of some relevance to the advocates, of Samuel versus Kattu Mahesh, reported in 2012 2 SEC. Now this judgment is concerned was dealing with the provision of Order 6, Rule 17. Here also the question that after filing the written statement, after a gap, the plaintiff filed an application seeking to rectify the boundaries of the scheduled property, or rather the scheduled property itself. Now the only reason, here that is what I would ask the advocates to be very careful and cautious while preparing an application. Now the plaintiffs, while filing the application, the only reason given by the plaintiff was that due to type mistake, the said averment the said amendment is required to be allowed. Now what happened? Apart from the boundaries, as I said, even it would also section 16C of the Specific Relief Act, there was no averment with regard to the readiness and willingness of the plaintiff. Now, after filing of the plaint, the written statement was filed and the defendant took all these pleas in his written statement, pointing out the various defects in the plaint. Now the Honorable Court, what happened? The trial court dismissed the application rightly by stating that there was no due diligence, and that apart, that once the written statement was filed and this application came to be filed at the fag end of trial, and therefore no, by merely stating type mistake will not permit the plaintiff to seek amendment of the plaint, as it is barred under the Amending Act of 2002, because there is no due diligence. That is what the finding of the trial court was. Now this was taken to the High Court, and the High Court allowed the petition, amending petition, and against which a SLP was filed. Now the court, while discussing the entire gamut, found that it was not only the scheduled property but also various severments were missing, because some about 3 paras were required to be added. And it held, in the given facts, there is a clear lack of due diligence, and the mistake committed certainly does not come within the purview of typographical error. The term typographical error is defined as a mistake made in the printed or typed material during a printing typing process. The term includes errors due to mechanical failure or slips of the hands or fingers, but usually excludes errors of ignorance. Therefore, the act of neglecting to perform an action which one has an obligation to do cannot be called as a typographical error. As a consequence of the plea of typographical error cannot be entertained in this regard, since the situation is of lack of due diligence, wherein such amendment is impliedly barred under the code. So that is what I was telling earlier, that the advocates have to be careful, because here in this case the very averment mandatorily required under section 16C of the Specific Relief Act was missing, apart from the schedules and other being wrongly mentioned. So the Supreme Court rightly held that by merely stating type mistake, how you can overcome that, because ignorance cannot be said to be a type mistake. So the advocates have to be careful, because here what I see is, because naturally the parties are not aware of all these technical aspects of pleadings. So it is a purely mistake of the advocate, because who in a cavalier fashion has filed an application. Now in this particular situation, the application ought to have been filed once the written statement was filed, and after going through the written statement, at least at that point in time, the plaintiff's counsel would have been realized the mistakes what is there in the plaint, but he didn't do so. He waited till the trial commenced, his evidence was over, and at the fag end he comes up with this application. So here my sincere advice to the advocates is they have to be diligent in defending or prosecuting a case, so that such error does not occur. And further, while preparing an application for amendment, you have to see the requirement of law. Now due diligence, the type mistake doesn't mean due diligence when you are not pleaded. What is the mandatory pleading required under Specific Relief Act? it can't be a typographical error, and then you come with an application prayer that you require some 3 paras to be added. So the court came heavily on the plaintiffs and dismissed the petition. So the next judgment is Rajesh Kumar Agarwal versus KK Modi. Now here is in this case is concerned, it is reported in 2006. The Supreme Court bench consisting of H.K. Sema and Dr. A.R. Lakshmanan. Now in this case, the application was filed for amending by adding a new prayer for mandatory injunction and other amendments. Now this application was dismissed by the trial court as well as the High Court, and the matter came up before Supreme Court, filed by the plaintiff. Now in this case, the court finding, it states, I'll read the relevant. The object of the rule is that courts should try the merits of the case that come before them and should consequently allow all amendments that may be necessary for determining the real question in controversy between the parties, provided it does not cause injustice or prejudice to the other side. Order 6, Rule 17 consists of 2 parts, whereas the first part is discretionary, which says may, and leaves it to the court to order amendment of pleading. The second part is imperative, as the wording used is shall, and enjoins the court to allow all amendments which are necessary for the purpose of determining the real question in controversy between the parties. In our view, since the cause of action arose during the pendency of the suit, proposed amendments ought to have been granted because the basic structure of the suit has not changed, and that there was merely change in the nature of relief claim. We fail to understand if it is permissible for the appellants to file an independent suit, why the same relief which could be prayed for in the new suit cannot be permitted to be incorporated in the pending suit. As discussed above, the real controversy test is the basic or cardinal test, and it is the primary duty of the courts to decide whether such an amendment is necessary to decide the real dispute between the parties. If it is, the amendment will be allowed. If it is not, the amendment will be refused. On the contrary, the learned judges of the High Court, without deciding whether such an amendment is necessary, has expressed certain opinion and entered into a discussion on merits of the amendment. In case like this, the court should also take notice of subsequent events in order to shorten the litigation, to preserve and safeguard rights of both the parties and to subserve the ends of justice. It is settled by catena of decisions of this court that the rule of amendment is essentially a rule of justice, equity and good conscience, and the power of amendment should be exercised in the larger interest of doing full and complete justice to the parties before the court. While considering whether the application for amendment should be or should not be allowed, the court should not go into the correctness or falsity of the case in the amendment. Likewise, it should not record a finding on the merits of the amendment, and the merits of the amendment ought to be incorporated by way of amendment or not to be judged at the stage of allowing the prayer for amendment. This cardinal principle has not been followed by the High Court in the instant case. Then it proceeds, it says that we shall now consider the proposed amendment and to see whether it introduces a totally different, new and inconsistent case. Now, basically this application was dismissed by the trial court and the High Court, stating that it is introducing a new and inconsistent case for the plaintiff. So the Supreme Court, dealing with that, said we have already noticed the prayer in the plaint and the application for amendment. In our view, the amendment sought was necessary for the purpose of determining the real controversy between the parties as the beneficiaries of the trust. It was alleged that the respondent number 1 is not only in exclusive possession of 57,942 shares of GPI and the dividend received on the said shares, but has also been and is still in control of exercising voting rights with regard to these shares, and that he has used the trust to strengthen his control over GPA. Therefore, the proposed amendments were sought in the interest of the beneficiaries and to sell the shares and proceeds vested in the government bonds and or securities. A reading of the entire plaint and prayer made thereunder and the proposed amendment would go to show that there was no question of any inconsistency with the case originally made out in. The court always gives leave to amend the pleadings unless it is satisfied the party applying was acting mala fide. There are plethora of precedents pertaining to the grant or refusal of permission for amendment of pleadings. The various decisions rendered by this court and the proposition laid down therein are widely known. This court has consistently held that the amendment to pleadings should be liberally allowed, since procedural obstacle ought not to impede the dispensation of justice. The amendment sought for by the appellants has been necessary in view of the facts that the appellants, being the beneficiaries of trust, are not deriving any benefit from the creation of the trust since 1991-92, and that if the shares are sold then invested in government bonds, the investment would yield maximum return of 10 to 12%. It was alleged by the appellants that the respondent number 1 is opposing the sale in view of the fact that the said shares are sold after suit is decreed in favor of the appellant. He will be a loser, and therefore it is solely on account of the attitude on part of the respondent number 1. Now, going through all these various citations, the court ultimately held that both the courts, that is the trial court and the High Court, committed an error in dismissing the application for amendment by an illogical reason that it is changing the nature of the case and is inconsistent with the case of the plaintiff. And finally, the concluding para I will read. It is thus seen that the entire case of the plaintiff revolves around equity shares. Therefore, a further prayer by of amendment was sought to amend the plaint and to incorporate clause 12A after existing para 12, and also to incorporate the relief of mandatory injunction by directing the defendant to sell the shares of GPI held by trust. Thus, it is clearly seen from the above narration of fact that the amendment sought does not introduce a new cause of action inconsistent with the case made out in the original plaint. It is pertinent to note that the following facts or application under Order 6 was filed on the same date. The appellant filed the amended plaint. On 13/1/99, filed a reply to the under Order 6 Rule 17. Appellants filed their rejoinder to the reply on 31/8/99. And admit it's hence the amendment application was filed prior to the commencement of trial. So friends, what I would like to say is that the amendment is concerned as to conclude. I'll just summarize as to the factors to be looked into with regard to the amendment is concerned. So amendment application are allowed when the application for amendment is filed to avoid multiplicity of suits, when the parties in the plaint or written statement wrongly describe, when the plaint omits to add some properties to the plaintiffs, and it will be refused when application of amendment or pleading is rejected by the court, when this amendment is not necessary for determining the real questions of controversy between the parties. Application of amendment or pleadings is rejected when it leads to the introduction of totally new case, when the plaintiff or defendant is negligent, when the proposed alteration or modification is unjust. Application for amendment is refused when it violates the legal rights or cause injustice to the other party. Leave to amend is refused when it leads to the needless complication in the case. Leave to amend is refused when there has been excessive delay by the parties in filing the suit. Application of amendment is refused when it changes the nature of the dispute. Hence, friends, these are the criteria under which the pleadings are to be amended, and as narrated by me in the judgments which I just read, which state what is due diligence and what are the considerations the court should take into account while allowing an application for amendment. So with these few words, I would like to conclude saying that procedural laws are handmaids of justice, and it is the court's duty to do not only justice but complete justice to the parties. With this, I conclude my lecture, and I thank one and all who have been given me a patient hearing, and more particularly Nyayavadi Parishad Telangana, which is organizing this lecture. And I would also thank my son Nitish Karur for assisting me in technical aspects and preparation of the subject. So once again, thank you and namaste to all.